Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming to what is likely the last meeting of the Warrant Committee in the calendar year. We have a number of things that we're going to bring up this evening, including the preliminary presentation by the school department and Mike Dennehy and I think Amy is here also. Amy, are you there? Yes, very nice. To give us a preliminary projection for what we're looking for this year in terms of for the next fiscal year, any issues that we might have to confront. But initially, we have our last meeting minutes. Have everybody received? I'm assuming everybody's received electronically. Are there any changes? And if not, the chair will entertain a motion to accept those meeting minutes.
Second.
All in favor? Any discussion? All in favor? Very good. We're done. Okay, we can go right into it. If our distinguished town administrator and town accountant would like to be first on the agenda, we're happy to have them. And I think we also have the chair of the select board, Mike Zulis. So when you come, we're very happy to see you. Thank you very much for taking the time. And I'll leave it to you to highlight this preliminary budget summary, which we just have, and how things are looking for the fiscal year 2020. Thank you for coming, Mike.
Sure.
Happy to see you. Mike and Mike.
It's the Mike and Amy show.
That's right.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. So we met on September 20th with our department heads. As this committee's well aware, we're kind of starting behind the eight ball this year with some one-time funds that we use to mitigate some of the shortfall from FY20.
Yes.
And then we had the useful life snafu with some depreciation that we also have to factor in for the next two fiscal years. So understanding that, we presented each of the department heads with two budgets this year to submit to us. What you're looking at now is level service. Level service can be described as exclusively your FY20 budget,
Right.
any collective bargaining agreements or contractual obligations, and that's it. Right? And the second budget that we asked them to submit was that same level service, minus 3%, which you don't have in front of you, but you can anticipate those minus 3% from the bottom line, anticipating that there's a shortfall. And at this time, we're about 2 to 3% short of our expenditures for the year, considering that we're taking revenues flat for the year, right? We're not anticipating the wealth and the bounty that we got from the governor 2 years ago, or the windfall that we saw with the override, obviously. So it's very preliminary. We're working through with all the department heads. You're going to hear from the school committee here tonight about and school administration about their department. So it's ongoing. As soon as you want to set up with the subcommittees to sit down and go through some of these numbers, the department heads are ready and able. But know that I think the belt tightening is the word. I came in the middle of the FY17 process, and the taxpayers voted unanimously for an override, which was supported. Again, FY19, we saw the influx of some state dollars. We don't anticipate that economic boom coming our way. So it's a very conservative preliminary report in front of you. So,
Well, okay. Mike, if you can give us some idea of when you talk level funding less 3%, what does that actually mean in terms of services that will or will not be available to the community?
sure, that's a great question. So level service minus 3% for some of the town departments cuts deeper into their general expenditures are wiped out, and it cuts into other things. Salaries and wages.
For example?
Salaries and wages.
Contractually, are we able to do that as a town?
Yeah, I mean,
Really?
but yeah, the 3%, in my history of budget preparation, usually it's your larger departments that can handle that 3% cut and cover some of the cuts from some of the smaller departments. If you remember last year, the Council on Aging and the Building Commissioner, they were less than level funded
Yes.
over the year, so they can't really absorb. That 3% literally means no paper clips, no stamps, no pencils, no paper. But it's the larger departments, the Public Works, the schools, the police, the fire, that are able to absorb some of that burden that's put on the smaller departments.
Does this indicate that we're not going to be able to buy new equipment if we needed to replace aging equipment? How will that affect maintenance, and are we going to defer maintenance, which is going to turn into something that's going to be more expensive in a year or two if it's not handled now?
So
I mean,
the
these are
Capital
questions
Improvement Planning Committee is entrenched in the process. Doug Zybeck, who's your representative, they've been meeting every Wednesday, trying to come up with, last year we basically dealt with must-haves. I'm pretty confident that the equipment fleet is in great working shape. That's not to say, as Mr. Driscoll would know, you can't forget your equipment year over year.
Right.
But we're in a good place. The Copeland Foundation was very generous with some of the equipment that they purchased over the years. The Capital Improvement Planning Committee did a great job of adding to that. I think if you look at the equipment around town, it's pretty new.
Yeah.
But what they're looking at is vehicles that are 10, 12, 15 years old that just cost too much to maintain, and you're better off turning those vehicles over. But I think we talked about pumping the brakes last year with some of the bonding stuff, so that's something we're working through. From a free cash perspective, if this committee remembers, there was a little over $1.7 million put in, that was authorized, cleared by Department of Revenue. I think we can use some of that for one-time expenses, capital needs, and I think we put maybe $750,000 into OPEB and some other stabilization funds to further secure some of those rainy day funds that are so important.
Questions from the committee?
Did I miss anything, Mike?
I mean, just a couple of additional points on salary, George. We can't lower the contractual obligations of the
Yes.
contracts. We can lower the number of employees who draw the contracts.
Okay.
Right, so whatever contracts we enter into, obviously we have to live by
Yes.
and meet. And though this budget reflects a rollover of those contracts with the new amounts. So the only way that you can lower that salary and wage number is to
Headcount.
headcount. Second, in terms of equipment, I think it's fair to say that if we have a tighter budget, then that may mean less for the Capital Improvement Committee to dole out in its maintenance. So that's number two. Three, in terms of process, what we're envisioning is, I think Mike, it's fair to say, what we're envisioning is a process on the town and school side similar to what we had last year, and that is the finance committees of the select board and the school committee meeting to try to reconcile the problem. Last February, we had a $2.8 million deficit, and through the work of the town administrator and the town accountant and the finance committees, we were able to balance until we had solid waste, and then we had to rebalance. So we're envisioning the same process. Our finance committees have already met. They're already meeting on this. They're going to be meeting again before the end of the year, and so that process is underway.
Yes.
And hopefully that will meet with some of the success that it had last year.
Doug, did you have a question?
Yeah, and please, thank you for being here first, but correct me if I'm wrong, because my memory gets a little hazy about the notes. In previous years, did we have employee cuts, and were these then restored with the override?
In terms of headcount, Doug?
Yes, in terms of headcount. So are we looking at a situation now where we're going up and down with the numbers of employees?
Not
Or-
during my tenure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we've been kind of level, and we're going to have to reduce it. Okay.
And again, it's a collective 3%, I think,
Yep.
that we're talking about here. And we're not going to, that 3% cut to some of the smaller
Yeah,
departments
to the overall budget, not
is
necessarily every department.
Yeah.
So.
So obviously, this is general, and we'll get specific information about the different departments in those budgets. But in general, is it correct to say that even at level funding, we're looking at FTE reductions? Or is that only once you drop the 3%?
FTEs
Yes.
are not on the table right now.
Okay.
At all. No, this is just a preliminary discussion as to how we get to that number if the
Okay.
revenues are as such.
Okay.
And if the state and local aid comes in where we conservatively think. It's not even a discussion item right now. This is so preliminary, but we had to drop everything in.
Yep.
Amy has all the books, and she's putting them together, and you'll get them electronically either through OneDrive or an email, and we can have them. I know there's several that want them hard copies.
We were gonna get them hard copies.
Yeah.
We're gonna get them both.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
I
yeah.
just haven't done the books yet, but you have one
I just wanna make sure that it's
drive.
on the table.
Yes.
Brian?
So I had to make sure I wasn't up on the screen. So for the folks at home who don't have the same visibility that we do here, in your perspective, what makes this budget unique and some of the variances that you're seeing here from a preliminary standpoint? What makes you optimistic and what are the things that make you pessimistic? Because you've done this many times before. I'm curious in terms of looking at it because we've had different levers that we've pulled in the past that might not be available to us this year. I'm just curious what your perspective is at first glance.
I think most consistently is we have Prop 2.5, and costs are rising quicker than 2.5, simply said. Some significantly, some 3x, some 2x. We went through the whole healthcare redesign, but conservatively, we're estimating an 8% increase in healthcare this year because we just don't know, right? So we have a much more sustainable plan, but even with sustainability, it's 8% for healthcare, and it's such a big number out there that it really has an effect on that.
Yeah. Sorry, so my question was more kind of below the line
Yep.
from an expense standpoint. When you look at the allocations of variances we're seeing here, what jumps off the page to you, if anything?
Well, wages are, a predominance, right? I think if you look back above the line, when you have 78 or 77% of your revenue comes from residential taxes, and I know we don't want to keep talking above the line, but, right,
That's the issue.
that's the issue,
Frankly.
right? That and the fact that our expenditures are rising faster than our Prop 2.5.
Many of the people in town will approach me and say, we have a terrible expense problem. I said, oh, no, we don't have an expense problem at all. We have plenty of expenses. What we have is a revenue problem, and it's very simply stated. You can't control the expenses because they're contractual, they're here, they're constant, there's a level of service which the town expects and should get because they're paying significant property taxes. The question is that, we're not right-sized, and we don't have the additional sources of fund that some of our peer towns have with similar services, similar levels of service. And I think that's the issue that we have been looking at and suggesting around other organs of the town to enhance. And the question is, can we do that fast enough so that we can stay solvent and meet the growing needs of the school department and the firehouse construction, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, Christine.
So, forgive me, what's chapter 13?
Those are the non-union employees.
I see.
Yeah.
Aaron, do you have a question?
I do. So what are you doing to work with the zoning board and the planning board about making it so that we can have other tax revenues in the town?
Politically, everything we can.
Yeah.
Well, no, I mean, I'm
there's
clear
a meeting- there's a
politically, like,
meeting-
I just want the truth. Like,
Yeah,
I mean,
there's a meeting Wednesday night, and we're going to talk about the next steps for the ice house.
right, I heard
That-
it's 56 or 54 condos, which isn't gonna get us much.
But it's
So-
dormant, it's a project that has stalled,
All right, doing,
right?
all that other
Right.
stuff, but like, what are you guys actually actively doing to work with the planning board and the zoning board to make it so that we can have some more revenue?
So I'll take that. I mean, I think that's, right now, it's on a project-by-project basis, and we're
So-
trying to work with the planning board and the planning board chair on the ice house project, because that's the particular project that well, that's the particular project that's really of moment right now. And beyond that, I think what you've seen, the planning board, and you've seen support from the select board and from the master plan implementation committee on the efforts down in Lower Mills
Yeah,
for the
yeah.
overlay zoning, and the new effort that's going on up in East Milton for an overlay, and with the ULI TAP project that's going on up in East Milton. So the planning board and the MPIC are working hard to try to come up with a plan, and the select board supporting them on that.
You are supporting them?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so can I ask a quick follow-up?
Please.
So I know that our chairman, and he's been very diligent in letting us know about, the issue with money. So where are we at with the pilot committee? Where are they?
I can answer that. I'm on the pilot committee.
Yeah.
I think we've made dramatic steps in conversation with the groups. We received a check for $140,000 from Milton Academy.
That helped.
First time, yeah.
Helped the last
That's the first time?
balance.
First time we've received a pilot payment
Wow.
Yeah.
from Milton Academy, yeah. And there were other checks, they were issued separate checks to both the police department, fire department.
And the youth task force.
And the youth
as well.
task force next door, which will be opening in January. So it's an ongoing discussion. It's not, at the current state, what we have talked about, they haven't met. Curry College and Milton Academy are probably 1/4 of what we've asked them for.
Okay, thank you for that
yeah.
honesty.
But it's a document that my board supported in February, and we sent off for the second year. It's the same model that Boston uses.
They just got wonderful new tax revenue from Tufts University.
They're struggling with it as well, though. There are some
I agree. But there are ways that
not-for-profits.
we can go about this.
Oh, there's no question about that. I think that this has been a subject that we've talked about here
Right.
several times.
Yep.
And it's, you don't want to go after people with a club, but there's
No.
a point in time when you're saying, you've lived off the munificence of the community and you haven't really returned much lately. And some of us have patience that, isn't endless, and I'm one of them, because I see the extreme generosity of the town, of Milton Hospital, Milton Academy, and Curry College. Now, once upon a time, Milton Hospital was Milton Cottage Hospital, and the residents would go to get better in a country setting, and the town of Milton sent residents there with some frequency. Now they're coming from everywhere, and the town is supporting it, and next, right here, they're putting some lighting on Reedsdale Road. Well, that's lovely. Reedsdale Road has plenty of lights, and I'm sure the people across the street from the driveway aren't thrilled about it, but they
So
can do
just for the
they can
record.
do a little better than that, I
Just
think.
for the record, that money's not coming from BID Milton.
really?
I had heard that testimony the last time around. It's a combination. It's part of the Complete Streets money that the town was awarded, the $396,000.
That makes
The
the
other-
case
the
even
other
stronger
piece-
for Milton Hospital to do
The
something.
other piece.
then.
No, and that's just for the record, because
yeah,
I heard the
thank you.
testimony last time.
Yeah, yeah.
But no, it's an ongoing conversation. The chair can talk about it.
And
Tony
I'll be
Farrington,
interested to
who's
hear. Listen, I know there's not much you can do. You can't go after them with a cudgel, but there's something that we have to do morally. There's an issue, I think, for the town, and that can be impressed on the presidents of these organizations and the headmaster of Milton Academy, headmistress of Milton Academy. The president of Curry College grew up here in Milton. We were schoolmates at the Pierce Junior High School. He understands what's happening. I know he has limitations on what he can do, but there are things that can be done as pass-throughs for these temporary residents in our town who take advantage of our services and who really don't give much in return.
So let me just add a little bit of color in terms of the history. For respect to Curry College, they've gone up from about, I think they were at
86 2 years ago.
$86,000 2 years ago. They're about 110 now.
They went from 86 to 100 and 100 to 110.
110 now. And then Milton Academy, for many years, took the position that because they didn't seek tax exempt status for property that totaled about $110,000 in taxes, that they were contributing that to the town. They moved to have that amount put on the tax rolls, taken off the tax rolls, and now that property is tax exempt, but they have paid that money towards pilots. So they've, in their view, they've effectively.
Back that up.
Okay, so.
I'm confused.
All
I'm
right,
just
so let-
confused.
so let me- let me-
they're
let me-
saying that their total property is
No,
$110,000?
no.
These
Now,
are
there
contiguous
was-
properties to the
Yeah,
the
so there
college
was
lot.
there was a portion of their property.
Yep.
Okay, for many years, they took the position that that property could be tax exempt, but it was still on the tax rolls.
Okay.
Mike, can I just
town-
interrupt you for
Sure.
1 second, just to give you some background?
Please.
Curry College for years has been buying property that is contiguous to its campus on Brush Hill Road,
Yep.
Bradley Road, Atherton Street, Blue Hill Avenue, and using those buildings as residence halls, offices for department chairs, programs that they run from time to
Right,
time.
deans.
Yes, and they've been
I got you.
upgrading them, and they're lovely and wonderful, but unfortunately, those were family homes once upon a time that paid lovely taxes to the town, which do not anymore.
Thank you.
So that's different than Milton Academy, though. So
Right.
Milton Academy took the position for many years that this property could be tax exempt, and so they were really contributing $110,000 to the town. They moved to take those properties off the tax rolls, and they said they would continue to contribute that amount in pilot. So they said, okay, we've been contributing this by not having this property be tax exempt. Now they had that property, they had that property judged to be tax exempt, and so they are contributing that equal amount, $110,000, and they have increased that now to
It was 125 in fiscal year 19, and they just increased it to 140,000 in FY '20.
plus
Wait a
an additional.
Can I back this train up again?
All right, so let me.
It's $140,000?
So
That's what we're talking about?
No, so what we're talking about is an additional, beyond what they've been paying over, from not seeking tax exempt status
Right.
for 20 years,
Yeah.
it's an additional $20,000.
So we got 20 grand.
We got 140, in the past, we've been getting 120,
We got 20 grand.
okay?
So
So we got
we're
20
getting
grand
that.
additional.
20
Am I
20
missing
grand
something?
additional. 20 grand additional.
Okay.
And on
Okay.
top of that, just to be fair, there was an additional 25 given to fire, police, and the youth task force. So the total number from Milton Academy is 165,000 this year, 140,000 to the general fund. These numbers are
Correct.
roughly right.
Yep.
And 25,000 to police, fire, and youth task force.
So
That's
for-
Milton Academy.
So for that
110 which would have
largesse,
been
we also
taxed.
take in 34 students who are children of faculty living in
Dan,
tax-exempt
forgive me.
housing.
Fair enough, fair enough. I'm just trying to give,
How does that
I'm just trying to give you the
equate?
background.
No, have
going,
you-
I'm sorry.
Have you equated that?
We're just making,
Have you equated that to what we're paying for the children of Milton Academy
That number,
faculty?
that discussion has been had in public
And so-
excuse me,
and so what is
that
it?
number has been, that discussion has been had at select board meetings for the last 2 years.
And the bottom line is,
The
we're
bottom line is
paying
what?
is, so
What's
what's
the
the
cost per
difference?
student?
Thank you.
About $14,000-$15,000.
Multiplied by 34.
The next group can
Thanks, John.
come up and tell you exactly. In the past, it's been about $400,000 to $500,000.
Right.
Dear God.
This is all great, and I think we should, keep pressing the institutions that can contribute to, we're talking about $3 million in additional appropriations this year. So even if we can double the amount that we're getting.
It's not getting there.
institutions,
Not getting
there's a lot to come.
Right, it's not getting us there.
The cost is $476,000 and $14,000 per student, times 34.
Thank you, John.
Doug.
I appreciate
Oh,
it.
I guess maybe to circle up on this is, do you know, off the top of your heads, if not, you can find out, what percentage of the revenues comes from commercial tax base as opposed to the residential property, which is the majority of our
So I
revenue?
believe it's 96% residential.
So
4%
three-
commercial.
4% commercial.
Yeah, 3 to
of all
4.
the town's revenue.
Yes.
Okay. So that could be another area for exploration, because I don't think there's gonna be a magic bullet of, hit one target hard, we're gonna solve all our problems. This is gonna be a multiple approach, I think.
John?
Where I park at Pepsi, the old Pepsi factory, they're paying over 120 grand in taxes, and they get nothing for it. They don't ask for nothing. So I'm just comparing what Milton Academy's paying for what they're paying.
Oh, no, that's not lost. That's a very good point also.
And they're not costing the town nothing.
No, I understand, no. No, they're good, I think they're reasonably good corporate citizens, too. Has anybody, any other, I guess the question is, as you have these conversations with our nonprofit citizens, not-for-profit citizens, how forthcoming are they with their willingness to shoulder some of the burden of supporting the services which benefit them?
So when Tony comes in, he can tell you about recent conversations. I can tell you in the past, because I joined the pilot committee before I was on the select board. And, we started having these discussions 2 years ago. Probably 2 years, 2.5 years ago. I think it's fair to say that the nonprofits, the large nonprofits, think they contribute to the town in various ways. And I'm not going to make the argument for them, but I think they think they contribute to the town in many ways, both the hospital, Milton Academy, and Curry College. And I think there's some in fairness, I think there's some truth to that. Our view has always been that there needs to be a contribution to the general fund.
No, I don't think anybody disputes that they do benefit the town.
Yeah.
The question is, do they benefit it in a way that can be experienced by everybody equally. And I
Well,
don't-
under the pilot program, there's a certain percentage that they should get credit for.
Right.
But that presupposes, the precondition of that is a contribution to the
right.
general fund.
Right,
And
okay.
then you consider what the contribution is beyond that, and you put some kind of a dollar value on that. But the initial, as an initial matter, you need to get a contribution to the general fund.
I agree.
Okay.
That's the
Can I ask one
policy.
more further question, only because I can't do the math in my head? Off the top of your heads, how many churches and synagogues do we have in Milton?
3, 4,
3 Catholic churches,
I'm going with at least 20.
4 Catholic churches. No,
I'd
no,
go
it's
half a
not
dozen,
that
less than 10.
many. Yeah.
And
4
how
Catholic
much
churches,
land?
Unitarian, Episcopal, 2 Episcopals,
I got 2 Episcopals, 2
Congregational.
UCCs,
right. The Baptist on the Parkway.
right?
9.
9, you
And
think
then
9?
2 on the Parkway, Parkway Methodist.
3 on the Parkway.
Oh, maybe 10.
Oh, that's right.
It's probably
So it
about,
doesn't.
And then
I'm just curious,
Temple
I'm
Shalom,
not,
which
trust
is,
me, my dad's a minister, I'm not here to, and do anything about the churches, I was just curious.
Yeah.
It was just part of my calculations about how much property is also out there.
John Cohen, town meeting minute,
come and speak in the microphone, please.
precinct 7. I'm curious, along your same lines, what percentage of our property base is nonprofit? And how does that compare, how do we compare to others?
I think there's 2 problems with the town of Milton. 23% of our land is conservation.
Right.
Right? So now you're down to 77% of
Right.
the land, right? And I think,
And we don't get anything from the state for that.
we get some money in the assessments,
We
in the
get
cherry
cash in?
reports. Yes, we do.
We get cash
I think last year was a little over $800,000.
Okay.
And it went up somewhat significantly, and we welcome that. But it's 20, to answer Mr. Cohen's question, it's 23% you can take right off the books,
Yeah, right.
basically. It's not.
You can't do
yeah.
anything.
The big 3 is about $400 million of assessed value that's taken off the tax rolls.
Wow. That's,
Wait,
that's
400 million?
400 million.
they have a
the
lot of
campuses of the 3, Milton Hospital, Curry College, and Milton Academy. 400 million.
About that, yeah.
Assessed value.
Assessed value by
They
the
would
assessor, yeah.
have, they would have paid like 8 million in taxes
Oh,
a few
more than
years
that.
ago. A few years ago. Yeah, but that's tax exempt.
I was gonna drink my that.
I'm sorry, was that 23% including conservation?
No, just 23% conservation, and then the other 77% is residential or commercial.
Okay. Any other
Quick
questions?
question. I may have missed this in the beginning. Under the revenues, we have an other available funds from 2020 to 2021. There's a drop of $3 million. Did you talk that? I must have
Amy, do you want
missed
to handle that one, please?
Yeah, that was mainly all of the one-time money, like free cash, the bond premium, items like that that were used to fund a portion of operations, which was somewhere around 600,000 or 700,000.
Right.
The rest were things like capital that we didn't want to bond because it was technology-based or a short useful life. So as of right now, this preliminary draft, and I should have written draft on it, doesn't factor in any of that. I just zeroed it all out. So the only thing that's
That may
left.
change?
Yeah, but it's not gonna help the bottom line because it would be one-time
Would
items.
offset something else.
The 251.4 that's factored in there is the overlay release of 250,000 and 1,400 from Leash. Everything else was, if you remember, there was some money from, I think, the recycle bins, there was money from bond premium that was north of $500,000. There was a lot of different things that we consider other funds, but that won't help balance, because it all went to capital or stabilization funds. If you notice, we zeroed out stabilization funds, OPEB trust, all of that, because it was those funds that were being used.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, I have a
Yes.
quick question. Is this our only chance to speak to the select board and the town administrator?
No, certainly not.
Before the budget's done?
No, certainly not.
Okay, good. Okay, good.
Really,
This is the
Oh,
first,
yeah,
Right, I
this
just
is the
wanted-
very
I
first
just
meeting
wasn't
we're having on
sure.
the subject. I'm sure we'll have several more.
Okay, thank you.
And you'll have our finance committees, you'll have the select
Yep.
board finance committee come in, and
Perfect.
so absolutely.
So
yeah.
we're gonna
This
get more
is-
chances at this after.
Absolutely.
We're actually starting early, so we have the ability
Wait,
to have
early?
these.
Us?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. So we have this ability to have these conversations so that, I mean, last year was kind of an extraordinary thing when we had our meeting in March where we actually did have to reallocate and discuss cuts that ultimately were restored in many ways, which was very good. But I think what we'd like to have is this open discussion where we have some communication and understanding of how things are shaping up so that we can avoid that situation as much as we can. And so that everybody knows that there is a willingness, certainly among the town administrators and the finance committees of the various committees, to certainly communicate and to have these discussions openly so we don't have surprises and so the townspeople know what value they're getting for their money.
And if I could just add, I think it's very useful to have that discussion in this committee of taxes, services, and commercial tax base. You know, and how that mix plays out, because, you know, people don't want to pay taxes, but they will. People are generally happy with their services, I think, and they want them to continue. And then, to me, the big question, which could mitigate the other two, is the commercial tax base.
Yes.
To your point.
Thank you.
And we know that there are issues with the commercial tax base here in town because so much of the businesses in town, this was a country town for years and years, and the commercial properties are embedded in neighborhoods, and when you expand those properties in neighborhoods, invariably you're going to get pushback from residents who think that that's too big, that's too bright, that's too loud, that's too congested, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't think that discussion is ever going to end, unfortunately.
Can I just go back to the vice chair's question about
do.
what gives me comfort
Yeah.
below the line? So this is the second year of our trash solid waste contract, right? We know a lot more now. There is an escalation factor built into it, but it's not like we're going out to bid this year and we're going to see the enormous increase that we saw last year, right? That 3.1% number is below the industry standard for an escalation factor. So we're thankful for that. If you look at snow and ice, I know it was this committee's trying to make that a more realistic number, just to put it in perspective. After it snows tomorrow, our snow budget is gone for the year, right? We're officially spent between filling the shed 3 times with salt and dealing with 2 snowstorms in early December. That just goes to show that it was this committee's passion, if you will, a couple of years ago to bolster that amount so that we're not doing reserve fund transfers at the end of the year. We weren't able to address that because of some of the shortfalls we had, but that's, I think, is a going concern in the future, because weather happens.
Sorry, you mean the fiscal year?
Or the
not
calendar year.
The calendar year.
Fiscal year, sorry. Fiscal year.
Okay.
Yeah, it's $150,000. It does not go far.
That's how we've appropriated?
Yeah, for years and years and years. Yeah.
I think
John.
you're
Also,
allowed
just for the
deficit
record,
spend,
he's not
so
the vice chair.
that's
Yes.
why.
Oh,
It's all right. John?
Sorry,
Fair
Brian.
to, just to get it out there, fair to assume that because we're so fresh that the idea of an override is obviously off the table, or?
Ooh, good question.
So I guess that's probably to me.
Cameras are on.
You know, obviously, I can't speak for the board because the board hasn't taken a position on this as yet. I will say that, you know, over the last 10 years, you know, when I was on the Warrant Committee and the School Committee before, and then the last couple of years on the Select Board, when we've worked the issue, we've been able to work through it. And so what makes me optimistic is that, you know, we've worked through these issues before, and we've been able to work through it. And we're conservative in the way we budget, and we're conservative in the way we estimate, and then that gives us an opportunity to work through things and get to the end game. So I'm optimistic that we will get to the end game on this without an override. I don't know what the board thinks, or what the school committee thinks, but my view is you know, we were able to get to the end game on a $2.8 million delta starting last February. And we're a little bit better off this year, and we just got to sharpen our pencils and work hard, and we'll get there. So that's my view.
Well, we're all working in the same direction.
I agree.
Scott?
Can you tell us, Mike, when we'll be getting that budget with the -3% that you were talking about? When can we
Are we
get
fully
that?
loaded with those?
So,
Oh, I thought you said it was
so
in
no,
here.
historically, how it's worked is, we start from here, and then the town administrator and the select board will use those submissions to make recommendations for where to reduce, rather than give you or this committee
Side by side.
a whole second thing. There's columns in this that are for like town administrator, select board reductions, school committee reductions, and then as a group, the school committee and the select board would present, this is how we're recommending it be absorbed or be balanced, and then this committee could vet that and change. So we don't, the only time we really present to is in the situation where we're looking at an override. So that was kind of my thought on how we were going to approach it, rather than to overwhelm this committee with two different things. We were gonna vet it with the department heads to figure out, you know, town clerk can't really reduce all of the general, so maybe we have to ask public safety to absorb a little bit more than the 3%. That's how
These
we
are also
done it.
questions that can be brought up by subcommittees when they meet individually, so I
Yeah.
think that saves a little bit of legwork, but I think that's not a bad way to approach it.
And then that whole prioritization piece where
Right.
we sit with the town department heads and say, what is your number one priority, right? Last year, we talked about keeping the libraries open on a Sunday. For $23,000, we can keep the library open on Sundays. Everyone was happy. You know, that went to the top of the list. Some of the stuff falls off the list, but it's more of a collective town and school department prioritization of when we get a more refined number, right? When we have better revenues, state and local aid, some of the
Yeah.
Kathy, did you have a question?
What's the current rate of inflation right now? Is it right around 2%
Is that your question?
in the United States
1.7.
this year?
Yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
1.7?
Yeah.
In Boston, we used to tie a lot of our contracts escalation factors to the CPI.
Which is 3%.
We haven't done that with the contracts in Milton, so I don't know what it is off the top of my head. I used to follow it all the time, but.
Yeah, the thing that interests me is that ironically, we always have an increase in the budget just at the 2.5% level. And
Matches the
that's
increase
right
in
where
taxes.
the Prop 2.5 override is, and I'm wondering if the taxpayers might like to see a little break in that sometime.
Kathy?
Just a quick question. So this 2.7 million shortage is on a budget-to-budget comparison. We're halfway through the fiscal year. How are we in 2020 in terms of actual expenditures to the budget? I mean, is it really true to form to the budget, or are we running over budget, under budget? I mean, if we're running under budget, then this, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Want to answer that?
Sure, yeah.
So it's too early to tell. I haven't identified any issues. I work closely with the department heads. It's really hard to tell because they don't spend it like your normal budget at home might be, right? It comes in, especially like police fire, it depends if they have any major events or whatnot. This 2.7 isn't the shortfall, that's the increase from last year's budget.
Right.
The shortfall is the number in the red box, the 2 million. So this really isn't any, this is only tied to the budget, yeah. I don't know if that answers your question, but if
One more easy.
I apologize. I need to run. I have a child pickup, so I'm sure they can take
We all
care of the rest of it.
understand.
Apologies
Thank you for
for that.
coming. Thank you for coming.
100%.
Happy holidays.
I have
Erin.
one more quick one. First, I want to apologize to Scott. I've been calling you John. Don't know why I did that,
Jim,
but you know, Jim, John, same thing. Sorry, Scott. Thank you so much. I have a real quick thing. We have, and the chairman has brought this to our attention. We talk about the budget on an annual basis. My question is where are we at with projecting our budget? And did this, so I have a two-prong. Where are we at with projecting our budget? And then second of all, did the vote that just happened with us having an actual accountant person, CPA, not you, Amy.
CFO.
I mean, the
Thank
chief
you, that
financial
one.
officer.
That one
Yeah,
that we messed up on.
Which was not ratified by the.
Did that impact our ability to project out about where we're looking. Because every year, we come back here, this is now my third year I've been here, and I come back here and there's no money, and we get that, and we cut, and we do what we can, and you guys have done a yeoman's work. Nobody's saying that.
Thank you.
My question is, where are we at with projecting in life? And did that CPA vote actually impact us from being able to project, in your opinion?
We're very close to coming up with our 5-year forecast. Amy and I were on a phone call with ClearGov, which is the financial software that a lot of municipalities
Yeah.
do. Not only does it show you where you are with your actuals and year-over-year stuff, but it's an N+2 model. So as soon as you get 5 years' worth of data uploaded, you can then predict 5 years out. We're close to that. It's a
Okay.
lot of inputting.
Poor Amy.
Yeah, it's a lot of inputting, and when you have 2 town meetings and, you know, we're looking at 2 budgets to load, it's a work in progress.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I just want to add that, you know, we're trying to do our best. We have very few resources in the accounting area on the town side.
Thank you.
So we did do a 5-year projection, but it was very top level. It was, we took the FY20 budget, we applied certain assumptions to salary and wage and certain assumptions to general.
Right.
We got pretty close. Was it exact? Absolutely not.
Right.
A lot of the departments came in higher or lower than what we were expecting. But that's how we came up with we need to ask for -3, and we're sitting here, and maybe it's not quite -3, but it's pretty darn close.
Yeah.
So
Right, no, I get you.
you can go, a few years ago, we worked with the school department as well as all the town departments, and we did, what would you say, Glenn, months of work? Trying to do a 5-year projection at the end of the day. It really
There's no
didn't
way
get
to
us
do it.
much more precise than
Than
what
where
we
we're at.
did.
Okay.
ClearGov will certainly help, but now I'm faced with, I have to do everything dual
Yes.
to make sure it works.
Well,
So
and
we
on-
shouldn't be asking for that. I mean, like, we shouldn't be, let me,
If you want it
that's so
done right, we
simpleton.
need a CFO.
If you want it
That's
done
the
right, we need a
exactly right.
CFO.
Thank you.
That's exactly right.
Thank you.
That may have
CFO.
been reported to you this evening, had that vote passed, right? Had a CFO.
Had the vote passed, we wouldn't be sitting here having
Well,
this
yeah.
conversation, because the role of a CFO in many ways is strategic planning. Having been one, I can tell you that's exactly what you do. And, you know, you're responsible to the CFO. In this case, you'd be responsible to the town administrator of the town, the CFO. So it's unfortunate that it was voted down, because I think it would be money very, very well spent.
I'll back that off a little bit. There was some restrictions in the town meeting article where it would have to expire, right? So that
Yes.
the treasurer would have had one more term left. It would have been April of 2020 before we could then seek
Understood,
his
but
direction.
still, we would have been put on the right road to sophisticated financial management. Not that you're not sophisticated, but that next level, which we are really approaching necessity
Right.
at this point,
And
Scott.
I will say, before Member Boynton speaks,
Yeah.
Amy put this together in mid-September and came up with the 2 to 3%,
Yeah.
and that's
Pretty good.
That's pretty close,
Yeah.
right?
So, Amy, we have to also thank Amy, because she's
Yeah,
doing
she's a rock
tremendous
star.
work for, being so understaffed. It really is really impressive.
If she was that good, we'd be plus 2 or 3%.
Yeah, but she can't, no, one thing, no, come on, Mike, she can't print it in the basement down here.
So can't make money.
Surely I jest.
Yeah,
Can I just add
John,
something?
yeah, please.
Michael and I spend a lot of time in the present and in the next year, but there's not a lot of time to think about it. So I put it as, way back when I first met with the Town Government Study Committee about the need for this role, it was, we should be working at, more long-term planning, more, instead of putting out fires and always
Yeah.
dealing with
Exactly.
the current thing. We don't, for a community that's over $100 million operating budget,
Yeah.
we have the town administrator, we have the town accountant, and I have 3 staff
Yeah,
people. And it's a lot.
A private
and-
enterprise would certainly have that function.
And certain things, because we're stretched so thin, might get missed along the way, so.
Well, we've heard at the town meeting, in fact, most recently, Mr. Wilkins said he would be very happy to see a strategic plan that goes out 3 to 5 years, and we've heard that here too. So I think that there is more widespread support for that than we might have imagined, but I also think that it may be worth thinking about re-implementing the idea.
I
You know,
applaud
can we
Mike for
reintroduce
going
the
on
idea?
record For saying, yeah, it would, I applaud you on record by saying, yeah, this information might be relevant, because you got town meeting in a year-over-year basis who insisted at the last override that, implied, not insisted, that future overrides might be tied to the idea of being able to forecast.
Yeah.
And then the very same governing body rejected this CFO position. I found those two.
The voters rejected it. The voters rejected it, yeah, which sadly.
That's right.
Yeah.
But I mean, my point is, I
don't know that they understood what they were actually
just
looking
need
at.
to, I guess my point is, what is the statute of limitations, or for lack of a better term, of reintroducing that, maybe?
The Town Government Study Committee reported to my board not too long ago that they would like to try that again.
Great.
Could it show up in the ballot next spring?
That would be more of a question for Mike. We did have a discussion at that time about bringing someone in, a consultant, on a project-by-project basis. My concern was $40,000 or $50,000 to tell us something we know, right? We've got
Exactly.
school
Yeah.
capacity
Yeah.
issues,
A hired
and
gun
we
is
have a
only
lack of
gonna-
revenue,
yeah, it's
right?
just gonna
That's,
give you-
I mean, I
you're
think we're
gonna-
just throwing a $40,000 or $50,000 out the.
My question was just more technical.
Can you do it?
It got turned down.
Fire people, so
No, but we can
You have-
reintroduce it. If
but
the
is
town
there-
meeting
it's gonna be in the warrant.
But is there a particular timeline where if something got defeated, you have to?
Wait, before you
That's
reintroduce.
a good question. I know the clerk has to know 30 days before. Is it 30 or not?
Well, I think that's something, if we can discern whether or not a CFO proposal can be put on the ballot for the voters to consider next
In
spring.
March.
Yeah, that's probably something that we might want to,
No.
you don't think so?
I mean, the thing got soundly defeated. You're gonna want time to campaign.
Probably. Right. Yeah, that's
You're gonna
probably-
want
I think
time
it
to
was
make
also
a
caught up in the
clear
treasury.
statement
Yeah.
on the ballot, which was very confusing for many who have voted for it. In my opinion, it was a confusing question.
But to Chris's point, maybe in fact a little bit of
But there was
publicity.
It was very low turnout.
It was very low turnout.
Very low turnout, too.
It was
Yeah.
also confused with the reorganization of the treasurer, elected treasurer.
There may have been a
position,
lot
too,
of conflicting.
so There was a lot
currents there.
going on with that issue.
But I think if we look at it, I think there would be support if it were properly explained and properly introduced.
Right.
I just think if you roll it forward, a lot of people are gonna be very scrutinizing of a future override. Yeah, so you've gotta stage it out, you gotta.
Agreed. Yeah,
It's
no,
not-
agree.
You can't put it off forever.
All right, we should bring the discussion to a close because we don't want to keep the school department waiting
I
too
just
long.
need to add two quick things.
Yes.
What you have in front of you and what I sent you on OneDrive, only the boards and committees have been approved by their respective boards and committees.
Right.
Anything else, we decided to provide in the interest of you guys moving forward on your work, has
Good.
not been vetted or approved by the select board, so just please keep that in mind.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Things could change. If they change, I will update you and let you know. But we just wanted to get you everything that we had so that you could start looking at it and digesting it. But just keep that in mind. The select board got it today also.
That's fine. No, we get it. And when the subcommittees meet, at least we know we're in the same ballpark, so we can all move from there. Last question, if anyone has one, because we thank you very much for coming, grateful for your time and the effort that you put forward.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.
Really.
Thank you for all the work this committee does. Thank you, Chair.
You're doing
Been a great help, so.
you're doing the majority of the work.
It'll be that cooperative event that Chair Zulus talked about.
Look, we're all pulling in the same direction. This is in everybody's interest to make sure that this works.
If anyone has a hotel in their back pocket.
I got some property.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next on the agenda, we have our distinguished superintendent of schools, Mary Gormley and Glenn Pavlicek, give us a preliminary presentation on the public schools outlook for next year. Many of us have been privileged to go in and see firsthand the work that they have been doing over the last couple of years. And the only thing that I will ask when you do speak is please make sure that you introduce yourself so everybody out in TV land knows who you are too. We're up on the screen.
Thanks for having us, Mr. Chair. I'm Sheila Varela. I'm the chair of the school committee. And here today we also have vice chair of the school committee, Dr. Elaine Craighead. She's also chair of our finance subcommittee. Superintendent Mary Gormley, assistant superintendent of business Glenn Pavlicek, and assistant superintendent of curriculum Dr. Karen Spalding. So we have the booklets that I think everyone's gotten a copy of, and we have a PowerPoint here that would like to walk you through our recommendation for fiscal year 2021 for the schools. We're going to start with Dr. Palmachuk.
Just a quick breakdown. You talk about how our budget is built. If you look at this very quickly, just in terms of, you lump instruction, instructional services, and special education together, we're at 83% of the budget. So, I mean, that's where we live. The facilities are small, technology shows they're very tiny.
Technology shows 0.
Because we use the Department of Elementary and Special Education, Secondary Education chart of accounts, which takes all the technology that you see in a classroom and puts it in instruction.
Right.
And all the technology that runs the administration goes
into administration.
Go into technology. So that technology is basically our network and not a whole lot else.
Thanks for explaining that.
That's how they decided to put it in the chart of accounts 2 years ago. So it's not a terribly useful number, the way they have it broken out.
Glenn, what would special education have been 10 years ago as a percentage of the budget?
As a percentage of the budget 10 years ago, probably 20% maybe.
So it's grown, but it's grown...
It grows faster than regular education.
That's what I thought.
It grows faster than anything else.
And the number of students who benefit from special education as a percentage of the total, does that exist?
16%?
1/6.
Yeah.
So 16% of the school population receives 27% of the budget.
We have about 4,500 students in Milton Public Schools, and I just spoke to the Director of Special Education today, and she said there are 675 students on IEPs. That includes out-of-district students and students that are...
So anybody on an ed plan, internal or out? Okay.
Yes.
And what's the total school population, so we can compare?
About 4,500.
4,500.
So that's 15%, if you talk about those two.
So I'm sorry, so the special education budget includes services provided to anybody who's on an IEP?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And that number changes every day.
I bet.
Our meetings held every single day, special
And
education.
there are people who go off as well as come on, yes?
Theoretically.
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 More go on than come off, though, I'm sure. Okay, please, go ahead. Sorry.
So, again, quickly, just how has it grown over the last decade or so? The two lines at the top showing the highest rate of increase are the instruction and special education. Basically, everything else has pretty well remained flat over the last 10 years in terms of budget. So our increases historically lie in the instruction and special education realm, which is where you would hope they would.
So many of you know from even our recent fall town meeting about our enrollment crisis, but we have to continue to speak to it because it plays a big part in our overall ask. So that, again, the K through 5 enrollment has increased from 1,734 in FY08 to 2,259 today. It's a 30% increase. Wow. Our grades 6 through 8 enrollment is increased from 867 in FY08 to 980 today, 13%. But it's expected to rise to 1,108 by FY 2025, so that's an additional 13% increase. And our grades 9 through 12 enrollment is expected to grow from 1,051 today to 1,293 in 10 years. As our current elementary, students progress through the system, an overall 23% increase. So this is based on our New England School Development Council, which is our gold standard NESDEC, as you know.
The one line that isn't on this, if you drew a horizontal line on this chart at about 1900, that's the capacity, the built capacity of our elementary schools. So.
Is there another slide later on, so I should hold my questions for the whole school development, elementary school thing? Or should I just?
We're not speaking to that today.
We're not speaking, nobody's talking about
School
that?
building committee will
School
come in
building
and
committee,
talk.
that's a different budget.
We'll have them come in and talk to us when they're ready. We have to treat that as a separate issue right
Yeah.
now, and I think that's the wise thing to do. I guess the question that I would ask, though, seeing these figures, I mean, we were many of us went on the tours that you very, very kindly brought us on earlier in the year, and we saw the stress at the elementary levels, less so at the junior high school, the middle school. But, we see that, you have, the principals have done unbelievably well, and Glenn, compliments to you too, for finding space where you've been able to, but now we're going to see that this problem is going to move through the school department and show it at Milton High within the next 2 to 5 years, or 3 to 5 years. And so the question is, how is that being anticipated, and what can you do at this point to prepare for that, if anything?
Well, to begin with, if you work backwards, at the high school, we lived in the days when Glenn would have a classroom, I'd have a classroom. We each teach 5 classes. There are 7 periods in the day. Then Karen would travel to our 2 classrooms. And so at the high school, we have room. We have room for the growth. And the middle school principal is looking at the schedule to see, I call one of the jewels of the district, the team approach at the middle school. Parents feel very secure.
Yeah.
You saw when you toured, it's like 3 different schools, 6, 7, and 8. And he's going to look at the schedule for the next 3 years. You saw the lunchroom situation.
That's the problem.
And so we're going to look at the schedule he started now to implement next year for the lunchroom situation, but then looking forward to even in the anticipated 5th grade going to 6th grade next year. So, there's room. When you walked around, you saw that it's sort of like the high school. There were rooms, if, all the 6th grades at lunch.
Yeah.
Again, it's optimum, the way it's set up, but we may just have to maximize the use of all the rooms all the time.
My 8th grade daughter has several teachers who have no classrooms, yeah. And I think it's
not optimal.
It's very burdensome for them. I think it's unfortunate.
It's sort of like a world language teacher often, well, the very room you should be in the room, and
That's
the
right.
world language should be everywhere around you.
Right.
As
So that's already happened. I know it's been minimized, but it's already happening at the middle school. And the 5th grade classes,
5th grade classes, it's happening.
enormous.
I can tell you it's happening.
Mine is, yeah.
So, Mr. Chair, can I ask a parliamentary question then? If we have questions about the school building and the possible sites for the school buildings, that is not for this committee. It would be for what committee?
It would be
Can
the
you
school
please tell
building
me?
committee. You can ask the question. I don't know how it's going to be answered.
Well, I don't think that, if this isn't the right people to ask, then I want to
Exactly.
direct it to the right place.
Yeah, I would say that it's a good question. I
But
think it's
it's
the right
coming,
question.
right? Those people are going
Oh,
to
yeah.
come and speak to us?
Oh, yes, we will hear lots from
Okay,
them, I'm
thank you. I just
sure.
want to make sure. Thank you.
Christine.
So I'm trying to,
That's right.
I'm trying to understand the projected data for the middle school and the high school. The middle school looks fairly flat, and the high school looks like it's going up,
Like 7 years.
which hasn't, the actual data has presumably some kids going off to private schools. What's driving, first of all, what's driving an anticipated change of people staying in the system and not going off to those private schools? And it almost looks like you expect the middle schoolers to go away and then come back.
What's happening?
They do.
They do.
So,
They do. Quite a bit.
but the actual data doesn't really show that.
We're seeing fewer, we're seeing a new trend, which is as we used to lose students between 8th and 9th grade. Well, some of the private schools then pushed down into 7th grade. And so we started losing students in 7th grade, and the new trend is they may leave at 7th or 8th grade, but they're back by 9th or 10th. We're seeing a huge return. But this does expect that our basic outflow at 7 and 8 and 9 will continue. The NASDAQ numbers don't assume that everyone is staying here.
So,
They have a built-in adjustment that we are still going to lose people at those levels. And they're looking at like a 5-year average of how many people, we have an 8% drop off at the certain level sort of thing. That is built into this. The secondary, middle and secondary projections are actually stronger than our elementary because those children exist. You look at,
They're not a
if
figment
you're
of
asking
imagination.
what the elementary population is in 10 years, they haven't been born yet,
Yeah.
any of them, right? Even the fifth graders haven't been born
Right.
yet at that point. So NASDAQ makes an assumption, basically, that the growth rate is going to, the birth rate's going to remain flat for the next 10 years, and things like that, that are conservative assumptions, but who knows? I mean, so in that sense, it's trickier to project the elementary. But what we have found over the last, and the school building committee will speak to this when they come in, what's a bigger factor than the number of children who were born 5 years ago is the number of home sales 2 years ago.
Exactly. Yeah.
In terms of what our kindergarten enrollment's going to be.
Yep.
It used to be, you could look back 5 years and say, this is what we're going to have this fall. And it's really home sales that are driving. If you see a year with a spike in home sales, 2 years later, we have a spike in the elementary school. And it's about an 18-month gap, we're finding out. But school building will talk to that when they come
And
in.
we have another phenomenon that I've spoken to at this table. In my history, we'd start in September, and that's who you graduated with in your class at every grade level. We register at least 2 children a week. Glenn registered a kindergartner today. So that's a huge change from what I've seen over the last, really, 3 to 4 years. And I wish that every student who lived in Milton went to the Milton Public Schools. I can't offer somebody a single-sex education. But for academics, I don't want anyone to leave. But we have, be careful what you ask for, we have 1,000 children who go to parochial and private schools.
We have 1,000?
Oh, it used to be even higher than that once upon a time, I think. Yeah. One thing that you had brought up, certainly in the last couple of years, was the students who attend schools but who may not be resident in the town. Is that issue
Yes,
still problematic?
Yes, so we, in this budget, you'll see we have a residency officer, and we also pay 2 Milton police officers a stipend each. And we do a tremendous amount of work, and I appreciate, as somebody at this table said, I know they do because I went through it. So when you register, it's a very extensive packet. And then we've put in, when you go from 5 to 6, or 8 to 9, you have to re-register, even if you have other children in the district.
Really? Wow.
And we put out, well, again, the work we're doing is improving. We've put out, on the average, 60 students a year.
6-0.
Yes. And so we'll go and we'll put out 10 students, but the residency person feels that we're doing a better and better job when people come to register with the packet and the investigation. And if we have any kind of question, we'll say, we're going to do a home visit tomorrow. We're going to do a home visit to your home, and I'll send you an email copy for you to send to everyone, the residency packet. But,
And it's a personal interview. I mean, it's not just the packet.
Oh, yeah.
You come in with your bills and your driver's license and they,
but we have.
Verify that you were doing what
We
you
have
do.
parents
Yeah, right.
who are
They
children,
didn't come to
but we work with, every staff member has to know how important this is. We have an anonymous tip line, and every administrator has to understand, no one that does not live in the town can go to the Milton Public Schools.
Well, I mean, if it's costing $14,000 to $15,000, if you're taking advantage of, you're not a resident, that's fraud. I
Right,
mean,
and it
it's
also
theft. Call
trains
it
a
what you
child
want,
to
but
lie.
it's still not right.
yeah, well, that's true. You're right.
So we're, again, it's hard for a lot of people, like elementary teachers, it's hard for them, for people. And it's, but that's what we do. And our nurses are good sources of information, but that's what we have to do.
Thank you.
So, going back to the budget. Current budget is $51 million, 82% salary. And that just, we are a service industry. I mean, as we teach, that's what we do. So to roll this forward, which you have charts in the section of the book here, we basically roll forward existing staff as of November 1st, put in their steps and lanes for teachers, put in either negotiated agreements or what we assume will be the negotiated agreement, since the main teachers union has settled, everyone else is going to settle at the same thing. Basically, it costs us $2 million to roll that over.
What is the contractual increase year to year for the teachers? 2%?
Yes.
And that's an across the board, or that's steps?
That's a COLA on top of any steps.
Thank you.
increase.
And that's through this fiscal year or next fiscal year?
We have it for 3 years.
3 years total, and it was
222.
just renegotiated last year, if I remember properly.
Right.
Okay.
This is the first year of a 3-year.
First year of a 3-year deal.
Okay.
Excuse me, can I ask a question?
Please.
Just a proposition point. So, tip line, before you get too far, tip line is to prevent other people from going to the school, like other family members?
If you
Non-residents.
suspect that people are lying about their residence.
So it's specifically non-residents?
The child being a
Yeah,
non-resident.
non-child resident, yeah, non-resident child.
Just one thing I just struck a chord, older people in the town have been here for 30, 40 years, and their taxes have been going up when other people have come on. And this is not the committee to talk to, but you're hearing. I said I was gonna bring it up. But they come and raise the taxes, then they leave, and then the people that are 40 years, 50 years in the town, they're stuck with the bill, with these kids. So, I mean, something for the town administrator, but
But
that's something that-
it's so ironic you brought that up. I don't want this to be a negative.
Yeah.
But I was going to say to the viewing audience, we take calls, and I would encourage anyone who suspected or knew of a student in the Milton Public Schools that wasn't a resident to just call my office or on the website, the tip line. I don't want to make this a really negative, but the irony.
Right, exactly. We don't want to be negative, but we have to go to town meeting, we have to be fiscally responsible.
Right.
And if
That's our job,
everybody,
too.
I mean, we have a lot, we have an enrollment crisis, and we're coming to you all for, a lot of asks, but we have to be responsible, and we have to put as many things in place as possible to know that that everyone that's going, that is $14,000 to $15,000 a pop, that they are from a tax-paying household, so.
Right, and you're thinking outside the box, and that's
Right,
what I'm just,
exactly.
trying to
Yep,
contribute
yep.
as well. is Instead of them raising instead of them raising, just the taxes of everyone else, that's gonna make the budgets every year is gonna be increased. So there's something to be said for the influx of residents that's coming in. What is it, when you have a spike in the real estate? You said 2 years later? What was that?
About 18 months later, we see a spike in the elementary enrollment.
Because people are moving here for the schools. They want to get in before their kids go to kindergarten, and then that's why they come.
Before first
That's
grade.
what happens, is
I have a question.
And then they get out.
Yeah, I was right there.
I have a question.
Get out.
Do you allow every tax-paying child that's a resident of the town to participate in the schools?
you have.
You have to.
Do you say absolutely?
Yeah, the child of, no, residents, not taxpayers.
Tax-paying resident child?
Oh, yes.
Resident.
Absolutely, huh?
Well,
No,
no,
every
what I'm
resident.
saying is, some people call us and they own rental property. They own property in Milton.
No, I'm talking about a child that sleeps in Milton, lives in Milton, is tax-paying, the parents pay taxes.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
It's by law.
But if,
Do you want to
What's
speak
the
to me now
question?
about it, or?
You want to hear?
let them get it.
I had an incident for a couple of years with you.
And you were a resident of the community, and your child slept every night in Milton.
Yeah. You don't remember me, do you?
Well, I would if, I don't know the name.
Scott Johnson.
Well, that was,
Caroline and Olivia's dad.
was that about residency or another part of the program?
That was 2 years of refusing to meet with me.
That's all right.
Okay?
Maybe we should have that conversation.
You're very familiar.
Maybe we could continue.
He was
the
attending athletic programs in the school.
Attending the athletic programs.
Uh-huh.
Oh, no, creating.
And what was the reason that we couldn't have a meeting?
I'm going to, Scott, I'm sorry, I have to intervene. This conversation really should happen offline, and I encourage you to do so. Okay, let's continue with the budget discussion.
Chris have a point?
So,
Chris, did you have a question? Oh, okay. Go ahead, please.
so just
continue.
this one is, of that 2 million, 1.85 is salary, 157,000 is expenses. So, I mean, again, we're 85% salary. This is actually over 90% of our increase is really just to manage salary. We are assuming that most of the other expenses are flat or, 1% or less increase, with a few exceptions.
I just think
Utilities,
it's
so-
amazing that you're able to put on a school district at $150,000 a year
Well, that's increase.
Oh, no, that
the-
says all other expenses.
That's
That's
part,
the
that's the $2
increase of
million
all the
increase.
expenses.
Oh, that's the increase, okay.
just
I'm
saying.
like,
The chair is going to
damn.
make a suggestion that we hold the questions to get through the presentation, because there's still a number of slides. So please, let's let
So,
Dr. Pavlicek get through this.
So Dr. Pavlicek just mentioned that, but unfortunately, you know, we feel this is not enough for our enrollment crisis. And so in our 21 ask, we are asking for the following: one elementary classroom teacher, the technology teacher that was cut, so that would be a restoration, one middle school world language teacher, a .6 full-time equivalent of middle school elective teachers, that's a restoration that we lost last year, a middle school guidance counselor, 3 high school classroom teachers, and 1 additional recess aide at each elementary school. Also, we're asking for an assistant director for special education.
We're still holding questions, correct?
Yes.
So,
Continue, please.
So at the elementary level, we're requesting an additional elementary teacher. Again, we talked about the schools being built for 14 strands. We have 16 fifth grades rolling up, and if the NESDEC projections are correct and our experience is correct, we're going to need an additional kindergarten. Restore the technology teacher. As you remember last year, we eliminated we have 2 technology teachers for 4 elementary schools, 2,000 children. We reduced 1, we eliminated 1 technology teacher. All 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders take the MCAS online. We have, as we said, 4 elementary schools, and to have 1 technology expert moving among those 4 schools is not an effective use of staff. So we're asking for a restoration. Somebody had asked restoration, that would be to restore the position that we had. And this issue comes up continually. We have more and more children, and the ratio of recess aides to students can be 100 to 1. There could be 1 adult outside in those playgrounds with 100 children. So we're asking 1 additional recess aide at each one of our elementary schools. At the middle school, we're asking for a world language teacher. I have a handout that I'll give you tonight of the classes that are over 28 at the middle and high school. And at world language, we have Spanish and French and Latin classes that are over 28. We refer to the very class that there should be more of an interaction back and forth with the teacher. We're requesting a world language teacher for Spanish and Latin. The French immersion classes are already large, but these have actually gotten to 30 in the Spanish and Latin. Last year, you remember that we reduced a .6 elective. That was, and we have classes of 28 to 32 in STEM, writing, and art classes. So we're asking to restore, again, that was the middle school cut that we took this year. And the middle school principal, Principal Fish, has done a tremendous amount of analysis on student to guidance ratio across the state and in our geographical area. We have 3 guidance counselors in the entire PS school, and we're seeing a need for an additional guidance counselor at the middle school. So that would be a new ask. And before we go on to this high school, when we work with the finance subcommittee and the school committee, we feel that it's our responsibility, charged with running the school district, to put out, again, what the needs of the school are. So we go to finance subcommittee, it comes up from the teachers and the principals. You know, I don't think you'd want to pay me to be the superintendent for 5 years from now. We find out that a huge need is in the area of world language. Well, the superintendent never explained this. So we understand what the budget is, but we feel it's our responsibility to put forward. Again, this is not a wish list. This is not a utopia. We know what happens in other school districts, and we think that this is what Milton Public School students deserve.
Yeah, along those lines, I'm chair of the Finance Committee, and we saw all of the principals, the special education director, the athletic director, and lots of stakeholders in Milton Public Schools, they all brought to us very pared down lists of absolute needs. And what you see in front of you is pared down from that, as far as we could go. Just along the lines of what Superintendent Gormley was talking about, at the bottom of this slide, the Great Divide in the Boston Globe is actually about the guidance counselors that she just spoke about, how overburdened they are, the number of students that they have in their caseload, and the degree of challenging and struggling students that they have to deal with now. The 6th grade guidance counselor at Pierce Middle School now has 350 students in caseload, and that far, far exceeds any recommendation for the number of students that you should have as a guidance counselor. And remember that the 6th graders are the ones making the transition, and a lot of kids struggle with that. So there's another reason there. But really what I'm supposed to talk about in this slide is the high school teachers that we need. We have 68 classes at the high school that are 28 plus students. 26 of those classes are core classes. So we have 26 classes with 28 plus students in history, math, world language, and English. As it says here, we're projected to get even more students over the next 5 years. Science classes are enrolled in above their seating capacity. They're enrolled at 24 now, but they're only the labs are set, and they only allow for 20 students, so you have students who are sort of jammed in there with the 2 students at each station that they're allowed for. As you know, science is a core requirement, and it's not a terribly wonderful way to learn. The only personnel ask that we have that is a non-teacher or safety issue like the recess aides is the Assistant Director of Special Education. And the Director of Special Education oversees a budget of $17 million, which is bigger than any budget in town except for the whole schools department as a whole. She does gargantuan amounts of work. I honestly don't know how she does it all. I really don't. She described a typical day for me, but then, of course, told me that no day is typical, and there are always crises that take her away from the work that she has to do. One thing that she's been able to do in the couple of years that she's been here is to create programs that have actually helped to save, I know this looks like a huge ask that we're asking for, but she's helped to save the town and the school department money. For example, she moved a classroom of NEC. That's a program that we have at the Cunningham or Collicott? Collicott. So that's a program that we have at Collicott, but she moved a class up into the middle school as well. If we hadn't been able to do that, all of those students would have gone out of district at a huge cost to MPS. She also added a language-based program at the middle school. Again, all of those students would be going out of district. In fact, the programs that we have here at the elementary level, NEC and Partners, have a number of students. I think there's 20-ish students in those. All of those students would likely be out of district. So if you add up all of the costs for sending these kids out of district, the savings that we've been able to do in town have been tremendous. But paying for this additional Assistant Director of Special Education would help the overburdened director. One thing that would be able to happen is that more of those programs for more cost savings could be created. And as I said, I talked to the Director of Special Education today about that. Another thing that that's not on here that is under the purview of special education is also homeless education, which takes more of her time than you would imagine. Even here in lovely Milton, and foster care children come under her umbrella as well. So she's going in lots of different directions, and anytime a crisis happens, that's where she needs to be. It reminded me of a situation of a principal, let's say, right? And a principal has a crisis situation with a child. What does that principal do if he or she has to go offline with that kid? They have assistant principals there. She doesn't have anybody backing her up. And when she has a crisis situation, it means she misses an IEP meeting, an out-of-district meeting that she might have to go to, at a collaborative or regional meeting or something like that. And it's not even really analogous, because assistant principals would only be responsible for one building. The director of special education is responsible for children over 6 buildings, and 675 of them, which exceeds the number of all of the elementary schools. Is that true? Yeah. So we really do need this person. I think it's very clear to us in Finance Subcommittee that hiring this person would actually be cost effective in the end, but it would also help to keep us in compliance with state mandates that we absolutely need to adhere to as well. And my final 2 things are the next slide. These are our 2 non-personnel needs. I don't know how many of you know what happened with the bus situation.
Oh, yes.
This year, okay.
Yeah.
It was a nightmare on everyone's end, the people who didn't have a bus and wanted one, and on the end of central administration who had to deal with the people who didn't have the buses. They did a gargantuan task. Glenn and Rachel Shuey had lots of great ideas about waitlisting people when they were waitlisted, offering them up MBTA passes, but for instance, a 6th grader who's 12 years old, maybe, you don't want 11 or 12 years old, you don't want riding the MBTA necessarily by themselves. We added more students to buses, and still nothing changed. We have 10 buses in town. Each one of those buses, as you can see here, costs about $75,000. Even when you net out what the people pay for the bus service, it costs us close to $60,000 per bus. So if you had a bus, you're looking at $60K. So we need another bus. We desperately, desperately need another bus. The law mandates that we give transportation offer transportation to children who live over 2 miles from school up through 6th grade, and then we sell the rest of the seats that might be available. But clearly, there's a larger need in town for the bus, and we need another bus. Actually, we need 2, but we pared it down to 1. As I said, this is a really pared down list from everything that we needed. And then also, one thing that was cut last year, along with the other restorations that Ms. Varela went through, is to restore the $20,000 in high school clubs and activities that was cut last year. What happened is that James Jett, the principal of the high school, actually spent a portion of his valuable time fundraising to try to get enough money so that students who are applying to colleges and need to have these things on their transcripts and so forth, and just want to pursue what they want to pursue, he spent his time fundraising with parents to see who might be able to chip in some money so that they could raise enough money to run the high school clubs and activities. And that shouldn't be the case. He shouldn't be having to do that. All right, so those are my slides.
So in summary, the current budget's 51 million. The straight rollover would be an extra $2 million on top of that. The actual needs that we've identified would be another $680,000 above that. So what you're presented with on the spreadsheets are basically these 2 pieces. One piece for just the rollover, and a second piece that includes the various different positions we talked about here. Just to quickly mentioned the 3% scenario that was alluded to earlier. 3% of our rollover off the top would be about $1.6 million off our budget. And again, with 80+% of our budget being people, it's people. And it probably works out, it's about the equivalent of 25 FTEs for that kind of money. We have no idea, just in the roundest of numbers, that's the ballpark we're playing in, if a 3% reduction were to occur.
It's 25 people.
Yeah.
Just making sure I understand.
And then, of course, we'd get nothing of any of the asks that we still need on top of that, so, yeah.
And you have the increasing enrollment and.
And so you have a couple last slides, which, as I say, only slides the Warrant Committee would love. These are the 7 basic categories that our budget is broken into by DESI accountant. This is the rollover proposal where the 2 million would break out. You can see the largest increment is actually in special education at a little over 5%. If we were to add in those other positions, so it'd be a $2.7 million, it's more in different places. Some of those numbers are bigger because you're adding one position in a small amount of money, so it looks like a higher percentage sometimes. But that's what it would look like with those extra positions in there.
Questions? Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah, very good for the first time through. It's very lovely. Questions? Christine?
The special ed, it's projected, obviously, that could change, right? How do you manage that? When do you know?
The bulk of special there's several parts of special education. First of all, the special education teachers. So we're taking the existing staff and rolling them forward. So, again, teachers by the DESI chart of accounts are classified either in the instruction category or the special education category. So in a co-taught classroom, there's one in each place. So a lot of that special education is actually teachers who might be in a co-taught first grade, or they might be in the integrated preschool, or they might be a support staff person at the high school, and so forth. So that part of it, I mean, we're just doing the same thing we're doing with all of it, it's just assuming we need the same level of staffing. And you're right, that can change, especially in the instructional aid world, where that is a little more, fluctuates a little more based on individual ed plans. The other major portion of it is the out-of-district. We chart the 52 currently children who are out of district. We know how old they are, when they're going to graduate, when they're going to age out. We have a list of folks who are on our radar, who may be joining those people soon if we can't support them in other ways.
So we can kind of bank on this?
I think it's probably as solid as anything else in there in terms of it, because the methodology behind it is the same. We have, with respect to the buses that was earlier mentioned, our bus contract is up, so we're going out to bid on a bus contract this year. So that's an unknown. And you've heard us say that 80% of the districts contract out their buses, and the vast majority of them get one bid. We've had one bid for each of the last 4 or 5 contracts that I know of. Because, bus company A says, you take this town and I'll take that town, and of course they don't do that. Well, that would be collusion. But amazingly enough, it works that way. It's just the sheerest of coincidences, but
it's tough.
I'm banking on it, unfortunately, and I'll send the RFP out to every bus company anywhere near us.
Just for the good of the order, how many bus companies are there that would supply the service, potentially?
There are probably half a dozen that are proximate enough,
And big enough that could handle the volume?
Yeah, I mean, you've got Local Motion, you've got First Student, you've got, there are several others. You start getting too far afield, for instance, if the yard is in West Bridgewater, they probably don't want to deal with that.
Yeah, but
if you're dealing with Avon or Braintree or Canton.
Dr. Craighead and I, sorry to interrupt, Glenn, we attended the Massachusetts Association of School Committee annual conference down the Cape this year, and they had 2 sessions on transportation. It's huge across the entire Commonwealth. We said 80 to 90% of districts do vendor out, like we do, okay? But, I mean, it's everywhere. It's Central Mass, it's Berkshires. So that when the contract comes up, you know, they put the bid out, and even the initial meeting, there might be 3 companies that come and listen, and then everyone, one bid. Attorney General spoke at our luncheon, and I said that I wanted to go. She said, is there anything else I can do? I think it's a crisis.
Yeah.
The transportation is a crisis, that, like, there is collusion going on.
Yeah, sure there is. John,
If
did
you
you have
listen to the radio, it's lack of drivers that can pass the test.
Well,
Drug test,
Yeah, sure,
everything.
that wouldn't surprise me.
They're getting a smaller field for people to pass those tests.
Please direct questions to the chair so we can keep it kind of semi-ordered, please. Go ahead.
send those out?
Well, normally what I would do now is give a draft of the bid to our chief procurement officer, but since we don't currently have one, I'm going to have to send it off to town council. So it tends to go out in March for a bid opening beginning of May or something like that. It really depends on how long it takes for me to get bid specs back.
And this is for our big yellow buses. This isn't for our sped buses.
Yeah. Aaron, you had a question,
I'm going to direct it to the chair.
please.
I'm curious if the town has worked with the school department on procuring a big yellow bus, because I believe that there's other departments, like our senior citizens.
They could use it.
That could also use it.
That's an interesting
And so
question.
I'm just wondering if there's a way to break down some silos here, Mr. Chair,
You can ask.
and to making it so that our children don't have to spend so much and everybody gets a bus.
Doug?
Just as a clarification, the chief procurement officer, is that the town's chief procurement, or is there a school one?
We don't have one. It's the
Okay,
town.
so it's the town one that's
Yes.
now unoccupied, I guess, is the role?
Currently.
Okay, thank you.
Other
Can I just
questions?
also speak to that?
Please.
We have a Transportation and Safety Advisory Committee, and we are also aggressively looking into ways that we can, the biggest takeaway that we got is to, believe it or not, to investigate and move forward to maybe, it won't happen overnight, but to buy buses and build our fleet.
Yeah.
That was the biggest takeaway from the people at the conference as well, even to look to maybe, I know you said in town, but maybe even partner with another
neighboring
district
town?
and to
Sorry.
say if we
A neighboring
did that, yeah.
Out of curiosity, when you see a bid come in, I mean, this one that's up now, what is the projected increase, or what is the discussion, or how has it been historically in terms of increases that we pay for? I'm assuming we never get anything cheaper than you did in the last contract.
No. And it depends we're going out on a 3-year deal.
Okay.
I think the last one went from 65,000 a bus to 71,000 a bus, so almost 10%.
That's an
It
enormous
was a fixed
increase.
rate for 3 years.
That's like quadruple inflation.
Oh, yeah.
That's,
And we're done this year?
yeah.
And we're done this year?
We're done this year. This is our final year.
Wow. Yeah, surprise. Okay.
Sorry, excuse me, another question.
Go ahead, Clint.
The sped, is that the same, is that separate, you said, or?
Yeah, so the the big yellow buses come from these companies and we go out to bid, but the special ed vans within the district, students on their individual plans need special ed transportation, or the 50 children who go to school outside the district, we have to provide transportation for them. So is it 1.3?
That's exempt from the Chapter
The bidding.
30B bid laws. So we negotiate, special ed buses are, for whatever reason, specifically exempt. So we negotiate with 4 or 5 different companies and play them off against each other to try to see who can get us this route at a better price and so forth. So we actually use four different vendors for
But not a
special ed-
contract with them.
Special ed buses, but they're not, it's a year-by-year agreement with each of them.
So if I may, so the big bill that just came out from the legislature, none of that includes transportation, correct?
Oh, it does.
Yes.
It does?
Yeah, it's going to
So we.
special ed.
For special ed,
Yes,
correct? So
special
we might get a sliver of that?
It will make some, currently, the circuit breaker
Thank you.
The circuit breaker payments from the state. What happens is if you have a child who has, for this year, be in excess of $45,000 of eligible costs and services, the state will reimburse you, assuming it's fully funded, which
It's not.
isn't always, 75% of the cost over that.
Okay.
All right? So for instance, last year, you'll see in our special ed budget, we had put in the cost of out-of-district tuitions, and we took off $1.6 million, which was our circuit breaker payment. All right? What the new law has done is it's allowed special ed transportation to be included in that computation. Never has been in the past. It was only certain billable services, but not transportation. But they're phasing it in. So for this year, we can count 25% of our special education transportation costs to be go into the computation to be reimbursed next year. And then the following year be 50%, 75%, and then finally all of the special education costs. So it's being phased in over 4 years.
So there'll be a little relief.
Yes,
next year.
Next year.
But next year.
But it shows how it's impacting every single school.
But it is, it is something we have to work out, and we have to figure out. For instance, on a child who is in district, who we may not have been able to claim for before.
Yeah.
But if we're transporting that child to the Collicut school every day at, $17, $18 a day per child on that van, that may give us enough services that make that child at least partially claimable.
Yeah, right.
And so we're going to have to look at that to see what effect this will have. Now, granted, again, that child may cost us $30,000 a year to transport, but we're only going to claim 25% of it this year, so that $7,500 may or may not be enough to push us over the edge. But for the child who is on an out-of-district placement, where we're paying $150 a day to transport this child somewhere an hour from here.
Yeah, that helps.
That's, even 25% of that
Big help.
is going to make an impact on our circuit breaker reimbursement, and we have to sit down and work out what that's going to be. I mean, these are, when Amy was here before, these are some of the pieces that we have to play into that are going to come in between now and town meeting as we work out some of these things. The rejiggering of Chapter 70 will have some effects on us as well. As we have more ELL students, we have more students of some of the qualified categories. We do expect our Chapter 70 to go up this year. So, but we have to get into the weeds of that. Which is why, I'm one of the ones like Zulus who has some hope that we'll work this out.
Absolutely.
Because there are a lot of variables here that just aren't ready. And if you're just going to say, revenue is flat, I can, I'll sit here and guarantee you revenue is not flat. It's not going to happen.
Additional questions?
I have a question.
Please.
And this is a huge oversimplification, but just so I have a general idea. We're mandated by law to provide services, special education services, at a specified level for each student, correct? In accordance with their directive okay. So those services, be it transportation, one-on-one aids, teaching, everything, though we don't have an option of reducing those services in accordance with a cut. So if there were a 3% across the board cut to the department's budget, you would then see a shift of a higher proportion of the budget then into the special education services, correct? Whereas the other, the general student population would, when there's 27 kids in my first grader's classroom, they're going to see a greater effect.
On my son's English classroom that has 32.
Yeah, that's
35.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Amy, did you have a question? Please come so you can hear it in the microphone. Oh, yeah.
The budget you have, some of the Chapter 70 increases reflected.
Okay, I haven't seen what you got.
Yeah.
All right, okay.
If that doesn't come through, that's not gonna help unless it's more than the estimate of 800,000.
She's already adjusted for those changes.
She's adjusted for the Chapter 70.
Subcommittee will work through that, I'm sure, when they have questions. Jonathan?
You mentioned about the special ed director, and you varied. Is there any way to quantify? Because I actually what you said resonated with me to suggest that that person might, help out with the, somehow maintaining kids in district, and even if it's like something for the subcommittee, or even something to add, which is to say, and not, make up numbers, if an out-of-district student costs the town, $30,000, I mean, it only takes 3 to make up a $100,000 salary. Is there any way to put some numbers behind that?
In the current program we have, the NEC Partners Program, which is for children in the elementary school on the autism spectrum. We run that program at the Collicutt School. We have about 20 children in it, almost 20 children in it. It costs us about $50,000 per child to run that program, because you have to have a teacher, you have a person with each child. These are high-needs children. They have to have discrete trial training. They have lots of things. So it's costing us about $50,000 a head to run those programs. To send one child out of district with that diagnosis, you're at least $150,000.
Yep.
All right, so it doesn't take 3.
Right.
When we toured the schools, we saw this in action, and it was remarkable, the result that they were getting. It was really impressive.
It might even be beneficial to kind of, for the visually, to put.
Well, what we're seeing now is that program is rolling up to the middle school. And this is where we're starting to really, we don't want those children in 6th grade and leave.
What you gotta do is there are other opportunities. That's great. That's a current program.
But to your point, that person has the expertise to develop the program. Only Glenn and Karen and I couldn't develop the NEC program. Only a SPED director or an assistant has the expertise to say, I see that we have 4 high schoolers who all have the same need. Let's see if we can develop an in-house program, one by one, see if those children will come back to the Milton Public Schools. That's the kind of work.
So that's what I'm saying, there is an addressable, there are opportunities that you think exist if somebody had the bandwidth to pursue.
Creating. We couldn't create those programs. You have to have a special education background.
What's the general cost of an assistant special ed, salary and benefits of an assistant special education director?
You would be, it would be what's called a Unit B position, a director position in the second unit. Entry cost there is probably on the order of $95,000, something of that ballpark.
That's salary and benefits?
That's salary.
That's salary. Benefits would be another 30%, give or take. Yeah.
120.
Other questions? Thank you very much.
I have one
more,
quick thing,
go ahead.
just real quick. I know that we all talk about the pressures that are on residential families, but residential families are moving into Milton because of our school system. And if we don't continue to support our school system and support what they're doing, then all of our collective property values are going to go down because our ratings are going to go down across the board. And I don't mean to beat this drum. I know I've beat it to all of you in many private meetings. But I just want to say, I know it's a huge portion of our budget, but it so impacts not only who we are as a community, but who we want to be and who we want to put out into the world. And so I just want to say thank you. I know it was hard. I know this is a lean budget. I'm looking at it right now. It looks very lean to me. You're not asking for much more. And I just want to say this reflects on all of us as a community for what we choose to do. So that's my little drum.
Thank you.
Well said.
Thank you, though. The work that you put into this is evident, and thank you very much for it, because it shows great thoughtfulness, and you can rely on us to be as supportive as we can.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming. We have just a few housekeeping things as a group to talk about. The subcommittee assignments have been made. Lynn has the list, and we'll circulate them. If you should already know what you're on. If you haven't volunteered, you were volunteered and you were assigned, particularly if you weren't here. It's like the old story that, you get the job, the guy who wasn't at the meeting gets the job.
You were in the bathroom.
Right, or wherever. So other than that, we have, you're on nothing? You are? Really? Well, we'll
He
talk
didn't-
about that.
he didn't
Yeah, we can do that
volunteer.
later. So is there any new business that we have to attend to, Christine?
Two questions. So with regard to the subcommittee budgets, when
Yep.
are we going to be, what's the timeframe when we're going to be?
We should be meeting with them beginning in the first couple of weeks of January. The subcommittee
Okay.
should meet with the department heads in the first couple of weeks of January because DPW, the police, fire, safety, and the smaller groups that will come in that might have larger requests will come before us. It has been our practice to try to limit presentations to people who had extraordinary, to the major departments, obviously school, fire, police, et cetera, DPW, and to limit the smaller, and the library will come in, of course, and cemetery probably, but the little ones, there's really no need for them to come and talk to us unless they have some extraordinary request to make. So from that perspective, we want to limit the time that this large committee meets, talking about the smaller parts of the budget, so we can concentrate on the drivers over time.
Timing-wise, should it be before, after their presentation, or it doesn't matter?
It really doesn't matter. I mean, the DPW, the police and fire will come in, I'm hoping in the first week of January, our next meeting, if we can around that, it'll be in the first full week of January. And we'll have them come in, and so we can understand what's moving their budgets and the drivers that they have to consider as they're putting this together. And then I think then we just, the horse trading begins, because if we have limited resources, not everybody's going to get what they want. And we'll do the best we can, as we have in the past. So, question?
I have a quick question. Amy mentioned when she was giving her talk earlier that she was still working on the hard copy. I would just like to put out to the chair that I would really like a hard copy.
Oh, we're going to get hard copy, there's no question. I
Okay,
need hard
that's-
copy
I
too.
just- I'm just
You know, because I
saying.
like scribbling on things. It comes, we need crayons, right? We're still in kindergarten after a fashion. So I think that if there's no new business, we can suspend our operations until the new year, and I think our next meeting would fall on the 6th of January, which is the first Monday in January. Is that fine with everybody? We have the room Mondays and Wednesdays through May, but I don't think we're going to need it through that whole period. But
I have nothing
January
left.
6th will be our next meeting at 7, and the chair wishes you all happy holidays, and thank you very much for all the work that you've done.
Happy holidays to you, Mr.
Yeah.
Chair.
Well done. So, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
You always say that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Holidays.